Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is Ashley Koff, who's a registered dietitian who is the founder of the Better Nutrition Program, the nutrition course director for UC Irvine's Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute's Integrative and Functional Medicine Fellowship, and a faculty member at the Institute and Functional Nutrition Academy, where she teaches an integrative and functional nutrition approach to obesity and weight management. That was a tongue twister. I'm not even sure I said that right.
You
She's
got
also,
it. We just are testing people. You got it great there. Yeah.
she's also the author of her upcoming book, Your Best Shot, which is coming out January 6th, 2026. A practitioner for more than 25 years, Koff is leading a transformative movement in personalized nutrition, turning better, not perfect, choices into practical, sustainable strategies that deliver real health outcomes. Through patient stories and personal experience, she shows that optimal health is not just possible, it's essential to living your fullest life. Koff has been recognized as one of CNN's top 100 health makers, featured in InStyle as Hollywood's leading dietitian, and selected as Weston Global's nutrition ambassador. Wow. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you. Hi, friend. Yeah.
So you have a
Yes.
new book coming out, and being an
Yeah.
author myself, I love supporting other book launches. So tell us your story, kind of how this book came about, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll get into all the good stuff about GLP-1s, but tell us the story behind your book.
Yeah. The story and my story is actually in my book, which we could have a whole separate conversation of at 52 why one needs to publish their story as I recall it. But I think we're at a really interesting time in society today. I feel like we're at this inflection point, and my journey mirrors so many individuals' journeys. I used to say so many women, but it's really women and men. We have been in a society that has separated weight from health, and in doing so, really led me to be so unhealthy, and drove unhealthy behaviors mentally and physically. But in separating weight from health and not seeing our weight as a health signal, we also have really put the onus on managing weight or the goal of losing weight on an individual, and have created a place where there's just, I mean, it's $1 trillion industry, but where it's also just drives so much failure. And what I found for me was that failure for the first 20 years of my life was really kept me from being on the path to fulfilling my life purpose. So we're not talking about something small here. We can, all it takes is one brush with a health issue, and any of us understand how we are our health, right? Like that's what,
Mhm.
and like I'm staring at you right now,
Yeah, yeah,
as you're
yep, yep.
going through this. And, I think for me, I recall, and I go on this whole journey. I was a kid that I describe myself as somewhere between Shirley Temple and Spanky from the Little Rascals. And, I had this curly hair and this big personality, and I loved to show off. And, but I also had that belly, and, that belly was cute until about age 8. And then I remember at age 8, a boy like taking me out back and like beating me up and punching me in my belly and
Oh
calling me
my
fat.
gosh.
And you have those moments, and it's like, and I wasn't called fat once, I was called like on repeat, but I think I remember that moment so profoundly because it was a moment where I realized that I was this like strong, like empowered young girl. Even at 8, I had kids that worked for me. Like I did like all these entrepreneurial things and, whatever. And I was super bossy. But like, as soon as he punched me, I was like, I have a weakness and I got to get rid of that weakness. And I think so many of us, whether it's our bellies or other pieces, like we try to hide from that. And for me, it became this very voracious pursuit to get rid of my belly. And society teed up all these different options, from disordered eating diets, programs, all sorts of things. Doctors, saying like, hey, you actually don't have anything wrong with you. You're great on all the health markers, but you need to work on your weight. And I have to say, super grateful to a family that didn't treat me any differently. I was the girl and I in a household of all boys, and I ate like a boy and I played like a boy and I did, whatever I wanted to do. And I think that, society kind of saying to me that that this was wrong, or that I needed to be different, was something that really carried me to, trying out eating disorders in college, failing at eating disorders. And instead of like that being a good thing, actually seeing myself as a failure. So
Mm.
all of this played out, and I ended up kind of, after trying all the responsible ways to lose weight, trying some of the irresponsible ones, drinking alcohol, not eating, or just not eating at all, these kinds of things. And it really led to a digestive system that was in total rebellion. By the time I was 20, I was living in Manhattan or even 19, and I could not eat and make it anywhere without having to get to a bathroom. I had crippling anxiety. I stayed up all night. I had friends that come over to sleep with me because I was
Mm.
like, can you sleep on the couch here tonight? Because I just like, I couldn't. And so kind of like not being able to put all of this together, I met a healer who told me that she could help me. She's like, nobody was able to help me, but I helped myself, and now I help others. And I totally fell for it. And she pricked my finger, drew my blood, diagnosed me with a worm, and told me a 7-day goat's milk cleanse was like the way that you kill a worm. And I famously went on that, and I famously lost weight. I lost about 10 pounds over the course of 7 days. I felt amazing. I think I like contemplated a goat's milk only existence. I was like, all right, if this is what I'm supposed to
Something
do,
finally worked. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
something finally
Yeah,
works,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And then it didn't work. And so after the cleanse, there's always that moment where you're like, oh, it works, it works. And then it's like, and then, right, that's always, like, then I regained my weight.
Sure.
And I recall, like, I had gone back to yoga. I had not had a drop of alcohol since college, because I had been like, okay, that's something to give up. And I ended up walking myself into a bar, and I was at a bar drunk off my rocker, telling this story, like chanting with guys, like having to heal. This was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm going like, kill the worm, we're like, oh my God. And they're laughing at me. But I also was like, maybe I should be that stand-up comedian that I always, thought I could be. And I was like, you can be fat and be a stand-up comedian. I mean, that's literally what went through my mind at that time.
Wow. Yeah, yeah.
And this guy is in there eating a burger. You're like, where's the story going? And
No,
he
this is great.
like
Yeah,
is like
this is
eating this
great.
burger, and he comes up to me and he says, like, hey, I just want to ask, did you ever take antibiotics as a kid? Okay, I just want to be clear. This is like a bar in like 1997 in Tribeca. Like, this is not today. There's no microbiome discussion. There's no, and I look at him and I go, because I think I'm
This
funny.
is
I'm
not a
practicing my,
gluten-free vegan
yeah,
restaurant.
I'm practicing my stand-up comedian routine, and I go, that is the weirdest pickup line ever, but yes, I basically freebased them. It was the 70s, and I like thought I was so funny, and everybody laughed at him. And he gave me his card, and he said, well, I'm like, I actually think I know what's going on for you. And there must have been some moment of like hope in me
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
kept his card. And, a couple days later and whatever, I end up in his office. And here's a weirdly trained, because I come from a traditional medical background, a weirdly trained gastroenterologist. And I'm in his office, and he, for over an hour, he had not asked me a question about my weight, but he had asked me about the antibiotics. And he'd asked me, and he said, so you had ear infections and throat infections from the time basically that you can recall your existence. And we went through all that, and he goes, it's not what you're eating or what you're not eating. Your body doesn't have what it needs to run better. And I just stopped. And suddenly it was like I had been blaming every part of my choice, me, like society was more than happy to, tell me I was a bad manager of my weight, or I didn't do that, whatever. And I turned around, I was like, wait a second, this being is an operating system. And you're telling me it is broken? Like there's something that like I can fix? Like,
Fix. Yeah.
like here we go. And so, that was my introduction to probiotics. That was my introduction to magnesium in a supplemental form, because I needed to do some things to heal my gut. Later on, I learned about glutamine when I worked in the burn unit, and I was like, that's something else that I need. And, like all these others. So I ended up going back and becoming a dietitian. And why I tell that story as it relates to this book is that since I've been a dietitian since about 2001, 2002, I started working with individuals, and my job, my thesis was, I am going to help you with your longevity by helping you achieve weight health, by helping, and I want to take you from the disempowered space where I'm meeting you into an empowered one. And my rationale for doing that was to fulfill my life purpose. I'm like, hey, like this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing. But the second part of it was actually bigger. I was like, because you're supposed to fulfill your life purpose. And, we talk a lot of times about longevity of like living healthier for longer, like, these different things. But longevity is really, in my belief, about fulfilling your life purpose. Like we are here for a specific purpose. We're here at this time in this world, on this planet as a human. We have a purpose. And when you're disempowered and you're distracted from what you're supposed to be doing because you're battling your health issues, you're not going to be able to fulfill your life purpose. And so this, like, why is my book called Your Best Shot? And why am I like in this space today? Because there's never been a more opportune time with the introduction of GLP-1 agonist, a medication, which are actually a biosimilar weight health hormone replacement. And we'll get into all of
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
But if we now can, like, every time a study comes out or somebody talks about or is like, oh, a GLP-1 agonist does this, I'm like, no, no, the human body does this. And this is what those hormones are supposed to be doing. And if they're not doing them, these are signals for us. And if we can become a weight health society, if we can understand that optimizing our weight health is foundational to longevity and fulfilling our life purpose, then that gives everybody your best shot. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm doing what I'm doing here. Yes.
Love it. I got a preview of your book, and I was apologizing before we started recording that I didn't get to read it because I broke my patella and I've
Oh,
been delayed in life
distracted from
lately.
our life
Yeah,
purpose,
but
right?
but
Yeah.
your story is amazing, and I do want to go back and really read that because I'm sure you expand on it. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm hearing you right, this guy at the bar was a gastroenterologist. The guy that was
Yeah.
eating the burger was
Yeah.
more of an integrative GI back then who was
Back then.
recognized. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
supposed to be in that bar at that time to
Yes.
meet that guy that, yeah,
Yes.
helped direct you on this path. So yeah, amazing.
And you know
Okay.
what somebody actually
Yeah.
said to me the other day in an interview, and I never
Yeah.
have put this together. You know, when you do these, like,
Yeah.
they're like, you were supposed to do a goat's milk cleanse. And I was like, "What?" And they're like, because the goat's milk cleanse actually had a moment there where you felt great. You had not been feeling good for so long. And it's like any of us on a diet. Like when we've done it and we're like, wait, like we get on the scale and we're like, that number is where we want it to be. Or, or maybe it's something like, using magnesium and we haven't been able to poop regularly and now we can poop regularly, whatever. It's like there's a reason I was meant to do that, because if I hadn't done that, I would have been in the bar, but I wouldn't have had any hope, right? And there was
Mm.
a part of doing the goat's milk cleanse. That's what she put together. She's like, there was a part of doing the goat's milk cleanse that actually gave you the hope to say, I'm going to see this guy because I think there's something in
You
what
were
he's saying,
open to,
which is
yes. Yep.
really
Yep. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes our rock bottoms are so needed. Yes.
Very, very cool. Okay, let's get into GLP-1. So you've said that GLP-1 drugs are revealing something important about our metabolic health. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. About just before COVID, I think the study hasn't, the research hasn't been out there since after COVID, but just before COVID, they did an assessment of adults around the country and, thousands, but it wasn't everybody, like it's not the 350 million, but essentially looking at the criteria that we use for metabolic syndrome, which is what the criteria would be for in a traditional medical setting around like looking at metabolic health. So things like your LDL cholesterol, your waist circumference, your blood sugar as an A1C, right? These aren't the markers that I actually think are better for us to decode what's going on in your body, but this is what they looked at. And they found that 9 in 10 adults don't meet the criteria for metabolic health. So that's been positioned to say that somewhere between like 6 and 12% of Americans today, only 6 and 12% to 12% are metabolically healthy. This was before COVID, and I don't think we've gotten any healthier. So I'm just
So
going to
say that
say,
again. So
yes,
9 out of
9
10
and
adults
10.
do
Yes,
not.
yes, yes,
Okay, okay.
yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And when we look at this, by the way, kids, I mean, the story with kids is also disastrous on that part. So I don't want to just look at the adult piece because I think we're really in a generational weight health conversation. But when I look at that and I look at it through the lens that I'm understanding the body. So if our body is an ecosystem, we're not separate systems. We've been taught that we are a digestive system, a nervous system. We try to make things simple. That's not, it's simply wrong on that part. We're an ecosystem. So when something isn't working in one space, it's an indicator of all of these other things that we have to look at. And if we flip it differently, when we look at what's going on in the body, we can learn where we want to make interventions or where we need to shift things for optimization. So when I looked at that, I said, all right. And again, this is because in 2004, when I started seeing bariatric patients, I saw at that moment that something shifted in them overnight. Overnight changes in diabetes to non-diabetic. Overnight and over the next couple of weeks, changes in appetite, in hunger, in satiety. Like these were almost immediate. And in some cases, they were immediate on that part because we were doing a surgery. Well, when I dove into and talked to the physicians about what was happening, we learned that we were altering a couple of hormones. So at that point in 2004, when I learned that we have hormones that actually direct that tell insulin to go to work, or tell glucagon, our hormones related to blood sugar, or that tell leptin and ghrelin, our hormones related to hunger and satiety. And now, because of GLP-1 agonists, we also know that these hormones go into the endothelial, they go into our blood vessels, and they tell the lining of our blood vessels what to do. Or they're in our pancreas, and they're not just looking at beta cells, but we're also looking at alpha cells there. And what that spurred me onto was looking at, where are these hormones? Like, I mean, if we've talked about insulin resistance, or we've talked about giving a diabetic insulin, but there's a hormone that tells insulin to go to work, we're missing the first domino in a line of dominoes. And
Sure,
no
sure.
wonder our interventions have been, subpar in terms of success. And so when I looked at where are these hormones, well, they are in the lining of the digestive tract. They reside throughout our digestive tract. And we don't just have GLP-1 and GIP. We have PYY, which also helps to regulate not just hunger, satiety, but hydration. We have CCK, which in our gastric, in the stomach, is going to help not just with delaying gastric emptying, but with sending out the acids that help us to break down protein so it can be used the way that it's supposed to, and so it can be disseminated. So these hormones are so important. And what was key to me in that part was, if we are seeing these many people, 9 out of 10, we're not talking like 1 out of 10, 9 out of 10 are not meeting the criteria for metabolic health, then these weight health hormones have to be a foundation of that. And so what I went back to do, and what I've been doing in the last 20 years, is helping people optimize their health by saying, like, hey, are your weight health hormones suboptimally functioning? And if so, is it that they're not able, do you not have the nutrients to make them? Are they not getting where they're supposed to go on time? Are the highways and the byways crowded? And as a result, we need to work on that part. Are things broken? Are things maybe they actually are designed and they're working perfectly for you, but your other choices are suppressing them? And so that's what really got me into this space around weight health hormones, where I think the key thing for anyone listening to take away is, whether you ever have a relationship with a GLP-1 agonist in today's form or in another form, that does not matter. But you don't get to choose to not optimize the function of your weight health hormones, because they exist in your body and they play a very important role. And in an ecosystem, they're impacted by your other hormones, your sex hormones, your thyroid hormone, your, et cetera. And they also impact those. And then the results of, muscle, fat, bone, cognitive function, heart health, blood sugar, et cetera, on that part.
I want to go back to those satiety hormones. Most of the listeners have heard of GLP-1, but can you break that down, like what that stands for? And the GIP, you kind of mentioned the CCK and
Yeah.
PYY, but let's go into depth with those a little bit further.
Yeah, and with GLP-1, so first of all, these are peptide hormones. So that's important. They're made from protein, from amino acids. They're not made from our steroid hormones. Our sex hormones are made from fats. So that's an important distinction. So
Yes.
getting in enough protein and having the right amino acids is going to matter for their production and, their assembly and their function. And what's interesting about, we also know we have GLP-2. We're pretty sure we have GLP-3. So this is not something where it's like, hey, there's just this one hormone. And it's also not something where, if I take this hormone and it has receptor sites that we now know all throughout the body, if I take an injection or I take it orally and I just go right to those receptor sites and I satisfy those, it doesn't mean I've fixed the problem. You know what I mean? That's like going in and, like, turning on, being like, okay, I'm going over here and I'm taking a high dose of something, but I haven't fixed what's going on underneath. And I think from a hormone standpoint, understanding that GLP-1 helps to regulate bone formation, it helps to regulate the type of fat we make, the location of the fat. It helps to regulate muscle function. It helps in the regulation of, I mentioned that it's in the lining of the blood vessels. So making sure with arterial plaque, and also making sure for blood flow, and
Yeah, a lot of that's new to
endothelial
me. I didn't know that.
glycogenic,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like your
Yeah.
nerve, like, so there's so much in this, and it travels by way of we have receptors on our tongue, so taste, on there. It goes from the brain to the gut by way of signals to tell it to be activated by the vagus nerve. And then the vagus nerve takes it back up, or the bloodstream takes it. So it can go in different ways. So it goes to all these places. And with muscle, it's a little bit less direct, but with bone and with fat. And so when we look at all of this, we're like, it's a key player. Like it is a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
key player. So for me, when I've gone, I have myself as an N of one and I've, thousands of patients, I went and I looked at my genetics and I was like, this explains so much. I used to just look at my genetics and say, oh, I have the genetics to be obese, or here's where leptin resistance, could occur. But in terms of that, I actually was able to reframe my genetics and say, oh, wait, I'm a survivor. Like I'm an endurance athlete. There is nothing about my genetics that I should feel a victim of, like a certain body size. It just made me know that I have to, like, there are things that I have to triple down on. And one of those things is digestive function, because if these are not working at an appropriate pace and they're not able to get where they're supposed to go, and my digestive system isn't able to break down, move along, absorb what it and send where it's, nutrients where they're supposed to go and eliminate appropriately, any backlog for me, these hormones are going to be like stores fat, stores fat, stores fat. And that's like so that dance for me was one that I had to figure out. And then when my hormones I'm now 52, but at 48, when my hormones started to really shift from perimenopause, I was like, oh, thanks. And I saw my belly show back up and I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Like we're not doing that again. And so it's like, okay, I actually had to lean into treating it differently at 48 because I had to make sure that I was not challenging these hormones. And one of the things that challenges it is anything that's going to irritate or injure the lining of your digestive tract. There are my antibiotics. There are hormones that and therapies that people may take to I didn't, but like for getting pregnant, or that piece. There might be treatments that you've undergone. You might find out that there are ingredients like gluten or other things that your digestive system doesn't do well with. We're all in a toxic tank of exposures of, from an environmental standpoint. So there are irritants that are there. Many of us, some of us a little bit more than others, experience stress in our life. I bring a lot of stress into my life, both intentionally and, and have challenges. And then I was drinking alcohol, and alcohol is like washing your floor with dirty shoes. So I'm like, I'm trying to do all of this great stuff for myself. And, I'm coming in and the lining of my digestive tract also needed more nutrients. And I had been following this weight loss approach, and especially in like sort of my second phase of it around perimenopause, I'm then like, I'm going to fast.
Restricting
I'm
nutrients.
going to tighten my
Yeah.
window, right? And I was like, I'm going to tighten it. I'm going to put more in there at one time because I got to meet my protein needs, but I'm going to go tighter. And my system was so stressed out, so suboptimally resourced. And it was like, hey, like I'm creating belly fat because I am a baby crying right now. I am trying to tell you to pay attention to suboptimal function. So a very long answer to your specific question, but what it tells us, about these, and GIP is the partner to GLP-1. So I do want to be clear. It's another peptide hormone. And its angle is a little bit more towards glucagon than insulin, but together they're both regulating insulin and glucagon, which are the two hormones that the body uses to regulate whether it is picking up sugar and taking it into the cells efficiently. That's insulin, and most of us know about that. And glucagon is interesting because glucagon is basically from the liver, from the body saying, let's actually break down stored glucose to make it available. Let's make glucose available. And so what we're seeing now is, even in like with retatrutide, with the new medication, let's even try to agonist those receptor sites. Like let's come in and try to get glucagon to be working more effectively so that and what the result that we're seeing is we're burning more liver fat. Well, what is fat around the liver? What is fat when it's in a place that it's not supposed to be? It's a signal of a delay of system, of a dysfunction of system, or, of a suppressed system where things are not working the way that they're supposed to go. So it's really interesting when we start to get into this to say, like, the body is actually just telling us to do what it needs and like how to do it. But modern society has come in and said, like, oh, wait, let's just look at you as a total number on the scale, or let's just look at you as a 90-day average of blood sugar. That number is like so dumb at this point, or let's just look at you as like a total cholesterol and like just decide like that you need a medication. And instead we have to you may still need a medication, but let's figure out what's like these total numbers are total garbage. Like they're just not helping us in that regard.
You had so many good nuggets in there. I want to go back because the majority of my listeners are women in midlife who feel like their
Yeah.
bodies have betrayed them, right? And they're gaining weight as they're stopping cycling. So I've asked this of a lot of my guests, and we could probably do a whole podcast episode just on this question. But why do you feel like women in that demographic do gain weight, right
Uh,
as they're going into menopause? What hormone, what is the dysfunction, what is the correlation? What's your short answer to that? Because all my
Thank you for
listeners
asking.
really
Yeah.
want to know that.
So number one, if we've not had a weight issue, if we've not had what we perceive as a weight issue,
Yep.
or has been, or we haven't been treating a weight issue, we've thought that like we were thin or the right weight. And so we've been like, we have no health issues and we have like actually not been paying attention to them. And so we've had behaviors that have been band-aiding, or we've been keeping ourselves at a certain size by suboptimally resourcing our body. So that's one of the things. When you go into perimenopause, your body has to be optimally resourced because it is going to show up in a different way every single hour of the day sometimes, but definitely at least on different days. And so on a Thursday, it's not going to be like, cool, what worked on Monday worked for me. It's going to be like, I woke up cranky. I have this pain. I didn't poop last night, like, and I need blah, blah, blah. And if you don't have the right resources or you don't know how to listen to the cues and optimally resource your body, you're more likely to have issues where you end up continuing to suboptimally resource. And one of the myths about, and this is why the weight issue is so bad, is we think that if you're gaining weight, you must be over resourcing your body, right? We have this belief like you're
For
overeating,
eating, yeah.
Ashley. So you must be, and it's like, no. And I've had people be like, I'm eating less, I'm eating less, I'm eating less, and I'm gaining weight, and I'm gaining weight because weight gain is a marker of dysfunction. It is not a marker of over resourcing. And the majority of the time it's under resourcing or it's inappropriately. It's suboptimally resourcing. So that's number one. Number two, when sex hormones change, when they shift, and this has happened to us throughout our entire lives. And again, we might have used medications, maybe we used birth control, maybe used other medications to either stop us from having a period or a period cycle or to ameliorate some of that because it's inconvenient, it's frustrating, it's painful. Like I get all the issues. But when we don't go through, when we aren't tuned into how our body changes from a cycle throughout our cycle, we miss the cues that actually shifting hormones, it throws digestion off course. So why is PMS a time period where we get more bloated or more constipated? Because things are tightening before they relax. Once they're relaxing, why am I pooping my brains out the day that I get my period or, whatever? And we've leaned into trying to deal with all of these as their own little items instead of understanding that sex hormone shifting, they are directly related to our digestive function. Well, if they throw digestive function off course, they're interfering with our weight health hormones. And then the third one is, and then we either treat, band-aid, or we try to suppress it. So we drink, or maybe we stop drinking and we over-exercise. We hit, higher intensity. We shorten our eating windows. We talked about, like, we do all of these different things. And what we're doing is we're really not actually optimally resourcing the body in that time period. So it's a really important one. It's also a doubly important one for making sure we actually are doing the right thing to prevent or reduce the risk of diseases like cancer. And I want to bring that up because one of the goals then of this time period that we are blessed to find ourselves in is that we're trying to then shrink our fat cells. And we may also now be leaning into hormone replacement therapy in some capacity. Like the day that I discovered topical progesterone was like the greatest day of my life. I now like slather it on with glee before bed. And I'm like, okay. And now I've added some testosterone. I got a little estradiol on there. And as I'm doing that, well, remember that I talked about before, your sex hormones are fat soluble. When those hormones are done and they're used up, they become a risk, blah, blah, blah. They are the greatest risk for disease if they continue to circulate in your body. So we actually have to get rid of them. The way that we get rid of them is the body is designed with a detoxification system that changes them from a fat soluble to a water soluble format so they can be eliminated. That has to happen by way of our detoxification system, which requires resourcing. So if we are losing hormones, right? So if we're going and we've got less and less hormones, but now we replace it with the synthetic version, we better make sure that the body can actually eliminate, like detoxify and eliminate that. And if at the same time we're shrinking our fat cells, we better make sure that the toxins that we're liberating that have been stored in our fat cells, otherwise what ends up happening is we increase our risk for disease, and we also increase our risk for circulating toxins, which is just junk going to places where it's not supposed to go.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's going to be really important as well. Yeah.
Great, thorough answer. Okay, so now I want to ask you a question based on that answer, though. So, how do we optimally resource ourselves? So, what are some of the
Yes.
top nutrients we need to be putting in?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book about it. And like that, and that is why my book exists, because I want everybody to understand, first of all, you cannot optimally resource a body without an optimally functioning digestive system. And we never get to say, my digestion's great, I'm done. Our digestion changes every single day. Like yesterday, I don't know what happened. Well, I kind of know what happened. I went and saw like a dear old friend. She's 84. I went to the most beautiful place. I can't remember the last time I had a hot dog. She's like, should we try a hot dog? I'm like, I don't even like, how are you? And she's, by the way, I should say she's first organic chef in the country. Like, so we were talking about like, we went to this place where this local farmer had like, and their cows, and it's a beef hot dog. And I was like, all right, like I'll try this, Anyway, I don't think I had the best stomach from that. I was up all night, like just feeling like my stomach is still digesting. I'm probably nervous about my book stuff, like you name it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We never your digestion is something we have to pay attention to every day. That's the point on that piece. So when our digestion is off course, we want to support it, nurture it, but we also have to recognize if that is our issue, then paying attention to nutrients is a failed effort. And the other part of it is we tell these stories about, from a society standpoint about like salmon is a healthy food or kale is a healthy food. Well, nothing is healthy until it gets where it's supposed to go in the body. And that's the process of digestion. So instead of you are what you eat, you really are what you digest and absorb.
Yeah.
So when we look at that, and we say what nutrients, I'm going to come in and say, okay, let's look at your nutrition. Better nutrition is giving your body, yours, what it needs to run today. So it's time stamped. While reducing or avoiding what can irritate, overwhelm, and disrupt those efforts. So we have to find for each of us, and that's the definition I created for better nutrition. That might be that the quality of the nutrient that you're getting in isn't better quality and your body's a little bit annoyed with it. As an example, maybe in an effort to get in creatine, you're having a gummy and the gummy has artificial colors in it. And your body's like, why are you giving me artificial colors? I know what to do with lycopene from a tomato, but I don't know what to do with red dye, or that kind of thing, right? Or maybe you're giving it like a monk fruit or a Splenda instead of giving it sugar. And the body is like, I don't know what to do with this. Or it's so much sweeter than my body knows. So we have to, so maybe there's a quality factor. Maybe you're giving your body good stuff, but too much at one time. Or maybe in your choices, from a nutrient standpoint, you're giving it what it needs, but in giving it that, you're actually not like the overarching balance isn't better. So as an example, many of us our age as women today have been through the decades where it was like you need more calcium, more calcium, more calcium. And what was happening was we were becoming increasingly more insufficient and frankly deficient in magnesium. And those two work in balance. They work in opposition to each other to relax our stress response, magnesium being inside the cell, calcium outside of it. And when we experience stress, the calcium comes across and the magnesium has to kick it out. So if we don't have enough magnesium and if we keep increasing our amount of calcium, yes, we might be meeting our calcium needs, but we might be harming our magnesium, right? So when somebody says to me, what is the nutrient? There are so many nutrients. It could be like you could be eating protein, but if you're eating chicken every day and you're not having the beef or you're not having the salmon or you're not having the hemp seeds or you're not having the peanut butter, you might not be getting in the amino acids to make the hormones or to do other things in the body. So it's really taking a very global look at your nutrients on that part, which is what a nutrition specialist does. Yes.
Okay, let's go back to those satiety hormones. So, how do we know if they're low? Or, I guess, how do we know if they're underperforming other than maybe weight gain?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question. Thank you so much. Because if we just make an assumption that I have belly fat, it wasn't here before, and so as a result, my weight health hormones aren't functioning. Well, that could be true, but we also don't know how are they not functioning. We don't know where to target, right? Like we don't on that part. So about 8 years ago, as I was creating my company, I started working on how do we assess weight health hormones. And what I realized is there's no blood test, period, because they also stay on for 2 to 5 minutes. Our own stay on for 2 to 5 minutes, and then they're deactivated. So you're not going to see them in the bloodstream, and we're not testing from our vagus nerve. So we're not going to be getting like, on that part. And maybe at some point I know right now, like there are gut tests where you can see the ability to produce those, but it's the whole system that has to be better. So the assessment has 5 parts: lived experience. Do you feel full after you eat? Like, how, some of the questions around that. Some blood work just to get this a picture on like if inflammation's an issue, if maybe I'd love for you to have a wearable like a CGM, where a continuous glucose monitor instead of an A1C, but we can at least start with an A1C. And we can look at things like your vitamin D levels. Then we look at your breathing and we assess your breathing, because that's going to give me an indication of vagus nerve function or dysfunction. We're going to look at your digestion, because that's going to give me an indication of suboptimal, not optimal, or optimal. Hydration is included in digestion for me, so suboptimal or not, suboptimal or optimal. And then I'm also going to look at your weight composition, not your waist, not your total weight. So I want to know, fat, bone, muscle, and water content, and where those are. So I actually put that together. It's a free assessment on my website. I've made it free for practitioners, clinicians, and I've made it free for patients. I do want to let everyone know it's work. This is not one of those like go like answer a couple of questions and you're a bear or you're a number 8 or, and here's what your life looks like. The reason that I have you go through and do these experiments and answer and look at it the way that I would be interviewing you if I was your clinician is that it's going to not just give me optimal versus suboptimal, it's going to give me optimal versus suboptimal. If suboptimal, is it suppressed, delayed, or dysfunctional? Because there are different protocols within each of those. And then it's also, and this is where everyone gets mad, they're like, isn't there, I mean, like, come on, Ashley, it's 2026. Like, isn't there a way for this to just be like all done like through AI? And I'm like, yeah, but you wouldn't know where to go looking. So when we go in, it actually shows you what was optimal and what was suboptimal. And that's going to tell us where we want to go focus, right? So if your digestion is telling me suboptimal, but then it's telling me that it's motility suboptimal, I'm going to know that we go work on motility. So my book is the first book to ever have the assessment in there. And as I said, it's also a free resource for anyone that's out there. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so we can't necessarily test the hormone, so it's more of a subjective answer, and then you are putting it together and deducting what the next steps are for the patient. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so also, same note, if these are all underperforming, what does that tell us more about like our health span? Not just about our weight,
Yeah.
but I guess what else are we at risk for?
Everything. So I love that. Like it's an
Yeah.
ecosystem discussion. Like whatever your pain point is today, literally, like if you have pain, if you have an autoimmune disease, if you've got plaque on your skin, like plaque psoriasis, if you can't poop, if you poop too much, if you are have cavities, don't have like it's telling us everything on that part, because they're regulating what we're looking at is it's regulating our ecosystem, right? Like this weight health is an ecosystem. So if there's a part, so think of it this way. If you go to the gas station, you fill up your gas tank. Maybe you're like, oh, I think my tires might need a little bit of air. The light goes on, you do that. And you're like, okay. And I check the oil in the engine, and that's great. And then you're leaving, but like, smoke is coming out, or you're going slow, or you're hearing something. It's like something's broken in the engine, right? Or like these days, it's like, all these different things where there's an electronic issue, like what's going on in the car on that part. So what's important for us to remember is what it doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us to eat less. It doesn't tell us to just eat more protein. It does, especially if your digestion is suboptimal. It doesn't tell us when to eat or when not to eat. These are all the things that we have to lean into and look at and say, is that something that's working better for me or not? And that's why when I tell you, like, this book is half of the book is sharing the information and the assessment. The other half is the playbook. And then I had to do all of this online. Like I have a 30-day program online that complements this. It's free with the book, because I wanted people, like, this is a lot. You got to go through this, right? But at the end of the day, the reason that it can feel like a lot is that we have been told that there are such quick, easy answers. And the quick, easy answers are what have been keeping us and worsening our health on that part. So when you say, what does it mean for our health span? It means everything, because some of the things that affect our health span are our resources. So our time. So when we spend time on something and it ultimately doesn't work, that affects our hope. When we spend our money on something that doesn't work, like, so if you're buying supplements, everybody asks me, like, they'll go through this whole conversation and be like, okay, maybe I should do this with you, but like, you know what? I'm going to just get the agonist and get started. Like, I just, if that works out well for me. And I was like, we just went through, if you go on that agonist today with everything that we were just talking about, your health is going to worsen. Like, you are going to be the person who loses hair, doesn't make muscle, has digestive issues, get worse, like all these other things. Like, you don't get, it's not an either or in this part. And if you're someone who doesn't, like, I've got a story of one of my pages, I have several stories of patients in the book who don't use an agonist. If you were like, I don't want to use this, I don't need it, I can't afford it, I literally, it's not the right tool for me, but what are the right tools for me? And if you just are like, what about this supplement? There's no tool that is a solution. The solution, your best shot, is learning to use the tools and to have this very expansive toolkit, and then to come in and be like, these are when I'm going to use these tools and how I'm going to use them. Yeah.
Awesome. Your best shot then
Yes.
is the whole package, right?
Yeah, not a shot. That's
Utilizing
right.
the whole package.
That's right. Yeah.
But now I want to ask, so what, in your opinion, I think I know how you're going to answer this, but why do individuals lose hair on GLP-1s?
Great. So number one, we saw this back with my bariatric patients. I've seen this with a host of, I've seen this with nursing and pregnant moms. The body is under-resourced.
Yeah.
So the body,
and
it didn't start out under resource. It's not like the day you went on a GLP-1 it wasn't like you were resourcing it perfectly. You go on a GLP-1 agonist and now, on that part. And hair loss, remember, is usually about 3 months of an indicator. It's why it can be frustrating too. And there are other reasons. It could be stress. It could be, so one of the things that people don't know is that when you're on an agonist, it keeps you in a metabolically active, awakened state for that whole time, that 24 hours, 7 days, instead of the 2 to 5 hours, the 2 to 5 minutes that our own are signaling, it's keeping you metabolically active for 24/7. Why is that so important? Because it means that you're not in rest and digest enough. So if you're not in rest and digest, we've got to do, so part of the work that I do with my patients on agonists is I help them get into rest and digest while, as best as we can, while you're on the medication. I also will lower doses because I'll turn around and say, like, this is too much. Like, your body is too stressed out during this time period.
Yeah.
So it could be adrenal fatigue. It could be, cortisol issues. It can be any of these things. It could be iron. So there could be specific reasons, but the one thing that it isn't the medication's fault. Like, it isn't this, it's the, hey, what is your body, this resourcing isn't working. And we've added a medication now on top of this that is going to do certain things, and we have to address it on that part.
Sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned retatrutide earlier in the episode. Are you a fan of that, or can we go there?
Yeah, I love how everyone's asking me, like, are you a fan? Are you a not? Like, semaglutide, tirzepatide. Okay, so here's my statement on the current versions, the single, dual, and triple agonists. So semaglutide, tirzepatide, and retatrutide. And now we have an oral version of semaglutide coming on the market also. We've had one before, but we have with the Wegovy version, we have a higher dose one. So those all work as biosimilar hormone replacement therapy. So because they're biosimilar to the body receives them at the receptor site and does, by all assessment, exactly what it would do with our own. It just, the big dissimilarity, so it's not bioidentical like, say, estrogen is or insulin is, it's biosimilar. The big dissimilarity is how long it stays on for, right? I know how to work with that. Like, I understand what that means, downstream, upstream, side stream, et cetera. I get that. What I am not as clear on is there are newer medications in the pipeline that will also, to confuse the heck out of all of us, still be called GLP-1 agonists, but they are not biosimilar hormone replacement therapy. They are called small molecule non-peptide. So they're not peptide hormones. And it looks like if a receptor site has 2 pockets, so imagine them looking like a pool table. And if the way that the pool that you get that semaglutide and tirzepatide work is that maybe there are 3 balls, the white hits the 3 balls and they go into the pockets, or it hits 1 ball and it goes into the pocket. In this instance, it looks like they jump over that first pocket and they go to a second pocket, and that's really where the activation occurs. So they're like, as I look at that, I'm not anti, I'm not pro. That's like, I think that's actually like an oversimplification and kind of like, it's not a dumb question. It's just like not, it's like, it's dumb to think about if medications exist today, are you pro or con a medication? Like that's like, I am pro a person, and me getting curious about the person, and then me as a user of a tool, understanding how that tool is going to work in their body. And then this is really important, being there with them at every step of the way to assess how it is actually working. Because I can speculate how it's going to work in your body, but until it is actually in your body today, with the choices that you are making, I don't actually know how it's working on that part. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Let's talk about nutrition more as like hormone therapy. So, what are
Yeah.
some of the most powerful dietary interventions you've seen for naturally upregulating these weight health hormones? And how quickly can we expect to see changes in this kind of hormone signaling with nutrition?
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And it really depends because sometimes I have patients come in where we have to like, as we've talked a lot about digestion, where we have to do digestive repair work, right? And then and their nutrition, it really helps their nutrition work better. That was my story, right? I was eating beautiful food as a macrobiotic vegan. I just wasn't like, my digestion just wasn't seeing it as beautiful. So I think one of the strategies that in my mind is like the most important is to move from a place of looking at supplements and food in two different buckets. So really looking at total nutrition as an entity, and that's your food and your supplements, and they're designed to give you that 100, right? So like where you might historically have looked at and been like, oh, I take a magnesium supplement, I do this. And then over here, you might have been like, I'm eating, this food for protein, or I'm eating, and you're like, whoa, wait, lo and behold, the food that you're eating for protein actually also provides magnesium. Or maybe the food that you're eating has been processed to such an extent or in a way where it's now fortified with more calcium. Like let's take almond milk. Everybody thinks when you give up dairy, you're going to reduce your calcium intake, but you actually may increase your calcium intake, especially if you lean into fortified versions of a lot of these dairy-free products, because they put the calcium back in, and they put a form of the calcium there that is different than the form that you'd be getting from food. So I think one of the most important things that we can do is actually look at our total nutrition that way. Sometimes we see changes like overnight, like where somebody's like, that was so smart. Like as an example, if you are somebody who has been just having, let's say coffee, in the morning, and not having anything else until like 10 or 11, and instead you wake up at 6:30, and you maybe still have your coffee, but you actually have some food with it, or maybe you start with water, then have some food, etc., you may literally feel better that day or the next day, right? So some of the strategies around timing or around the balance of nutrients, like if maybe you've been somebody who would like grab an apple as a snack, or maybe you're the classic case, this was years ago, but I think it still applies. I remember there was a time period where everybody would have, all my LA patients for lunch would go out and get these salads, and everybody was having, I'll have a salad with grilled chicken, with no croutons, with the dressing on the side. And it was like by about one, like let's say they had that at 12:30, then by about 2 o'clock, it was like, get me in front of every candy machine or anything that like, I was just like, I need, or like, and some people would then be like, I'm going to have a diet soda. So now I'm having these sweet cravings, but now I'm going to not give myself any more calories. And then come dinner, it was like, boom, like I stopped by the pizza place on the way home, and then also ate, second dinner, because I was so, and so part of what we had to look at there was nutrient balancing, and saying like carbohydrates, proteins, fats, like in balance, they're going to give you better blood sugar balance. And that's going to be, and food that's delicious to you is also going to help you with satiety. So, some of the stuff that we're doing today in the name of nutrition that's so bad is saying things like eat protein first. There's no food in nature that's a protein, like literally, like not one that is just protein. It's protein and fat, or it's protein and carbohydrates, or it's protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and some fiber, and some antioxidants. So like we make these like oversimplifications to like tell people what to do, because that's our society. Like it's very much like, let me tell you what to do, right? And you're like, stop. Like, let me learn to nourish my body. And that's like just a different approach on that part. Yeah.
So you mentioned protein several times. What about fiber? So tell us maybe the
Yes.
importance of fiber, and then maybe walk us through an ideal day of what eating would look like for someone who's trying to optimize all these satiety hormones,
Sure.
especially again, that woman in midlife who maybe has gained some weight.
Yeah. So Fiber is a non-negotiable. Many protein-rich foods actually have fiber. They're plant versions, and they have amino acids and fiber. And fiber is not one thing. We've genericized fiber to be one thing so that the cereal boxes, when I worked in advertising that I was selling, and I could say this is a good source of fiber because I added some random fiber ingredient on there. There are a variety of fibers, and we need to get all those varieties in because they do different things in the body. Resistant starches do different things and help us with the production of short chain fatty acids, which helps us with our weight health hormone production. We have insoluble and soluble fibers. Often
Can
they're
you give us
combined
some
together.
examples? Can you go
I
back to
will.
resistant starch?
Sure.
Sorry, just
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
listeners. You're very smart,
Yeah,
but just to break it
totally.
down a little.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. And that's why I also have like lists and lists and lists. And it doesn't help anyone to be smart. And I also am not here saying like you should take away from this session from here what it is you should be doing. All of these are the resources in my book. That's why I put this together, because we need to have these. And but I appreciate the compliment, so thank you. I think that fiber, when we look at starch, when we look at resistant starches, the concept there is that there are bacteria that are, so they're, when we think about resisting, they're resisting digestion. And in doing that, they go in and they can feed bacteria. And we're probably also finding that even in addition to feeding bacteria and other microbes all throughout, there are going to be other roles for them. Like, and many, remember, fibers often come with antioxidants or polyphenols. So there's a lot to them. But if we really make it easy, we're like, okay, those resistant starches, they can either be the form of the fiber. So as an example, raw oats is going to have more of this resistant starch than when you cook the oat, because when you cook the oat, you break it down. It no longer stays resistant in that way. A green banana, a truly green banana or green banana flour versus, say, a ripened banana. The ripening process is the one that is breaking it down. So that gives you kind of the insights. And there are ones that are kind of
So
more.
overnight oats are better than cooking oats?
No, well, better is an interesting question, depending on my digestion and depending what I'm trying to get in. So overnight oats could be a good way, a delicious way to get in resistant starch, right? But you might choose to do cooked oats and understand what that's going to do for your blood sugar. And also because maybe your digestive system needs something that's more readily broken down, and maybe you want to get the beta glucans and that kind of. So we have to break up with a society that says like flax seeds better than chia seeds, cooked broccoli better than raw broccoli. I mean, like all of these different things. It's like, what's the intention? How am I operating, optimally resourcing, that operating system? So we have a variety of different fibers. And I think when we come back to what I will say about an ideal day is that number one are to stimulate, we call these hormones, like I call them weight health hormones. People will call them satiety hormones. We will call them blood sugar hormone, like all these different things. But I call them weight health hormones. But part of their job is to help you feel satisfied. That's why we have receptors for some of them on our tongue. Like that's why they're part of our taste buds. And they're going to that brain space, and we're triggering satiety in that regard. Or a message. So the core message is, hey, body, you've gotten fuel. And the secondary message is, hey, body, you've gotten something that's satisfying our needs. And as a result, you should be satisfied. And that's what satiety is. Well, one of the ways that we as humans are satisfied, which is different than animals, in as far as I know with these hormones, I think animals do actually really want to like their food. My dog would agree. But just let's talk about humans for a second, is that we want our food to be delicious to us. And if your food is not delicious to you, but it is healthy, you are very likely to eat more or to go away slightly unsatisfied or significantly unsatisfied. So one of the things I present in my book and I share with everyone is better be delicious to me. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is so delicious and 0 is not delicious at all, is it a 7 or not? And if it's not a 7 or greater, that bite or that sip, then is there something you could do? Or do you stop? Or if you need fuel right now, you need to be aware that I'm fueling, but I'm not satisfying. And that's going to drive me. So I just had this experience with a client. She's on tirzepatide right now. And she said to me, she's like, Ashley, I'm so glad we're having this session because I found myself yesterday. She's like, so it was after Halloween. And she said, okay, so I did it. Like I was not going to be that person. She was kind of, picking on herself. I wasn't going to be that person who is just like here to lose weight. Like I want to be healthy or whatever. She's like, but I did just have yesterday, the only thing I had to eat until dinner was a Reese's cup. And she's like, well, actually I had 2 Reese's cups, on that part. And she's like, so I was bad. And I said, well, I was like, was it delicious? And she's like, oh yeah, it was great. And I go, but was it? And she paused. She's like, what are you saying? And I said, well, I'm just curious. Like, was every bite of those two Reese's cups delicious, a 7 or greater? She's like, I mean, I don't know. I remember I ate it. She's like, and I kind of ate fast. And I was like, yeah, because you were hungry. And like, we weren't eating anything else. She's like, I know, I know. She's like, but I didn't have any more. Like the medication works, et cetera. And then and we talked about what she had at dinner. And I said, all right, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home and I want you to bite into a Reese's cup. And I was like, and I want you for every bite that you take to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10. And she's like, get this message from her. She's like, 4 bites? She's like, I didn't even get through the whole cup. It was 4 bites. And I was like, yeah. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying that we should go on the Reese's cup diet. In my book features a gentleman who went on Mr. Pizza Pop. He's on the pizza diet. I'm not saying that you need to do that, but what I am saying is that deliciousness is an antidote to wanting to have certain things like the French fries, the ice cream, et cetera. Now, we do have to recognize that our food is designed, especially our processed food is designed, fat, sugar, and salt today, to override those satiety. So they're designed for them to taste delicious, but for our hormones to not receive that and turn off. So that's one of the reasons why we have to look at the other, which brings me to, we have to not just lean into sweet. We have to look at bitter and salty and, some of the other, like we want the other, flavors in there. So when I look at what's ideal in that space, the good news is it really depends. Like it's going to, there are things that we can't get away from the timing, like making sure that we're giving from the time that we're awake and active, making sure that we're giving our body nutrition to resource it throughout the day is going to be important. So that's the timing part of this. And there's a frequency, a cadence that's in there. The second part of it is we also have to look at the balance of nutrients, and that's going to be important, as we talked about. The quality, not giving our body something that it thinks is going to do something in the body, but not do something on that part. And then, so when we look at that and we're looking at balance, quantity, and, and certainly not giving it too much at one time or not giving it enough. So when that comes in, can it be cooked oats or overnight oats? That's going to depend. But if I'm having the oats, then I also have to look at, all right, that's giving me carbohydrates, some fiber, depending on what, if I'm doing overnight oats or if I'm putting almond milk or regular milk, it might give me fat, it might give me water. I personally like to put olive oil, salt. Because I like savory overnight oats. So, so I do it like nobody wants to eat like me. I love like sauteed mushrooms. Like I do like, savory. But then I'll do 2 eggs and I might do some hemp seeds on top of it so that I get enough protein in there. And so I've got the protein, the fat, the carbohydrates, right? So the nutrient balance is going to be important there. Another one that's key is like, if you're having your coffee and you're putting something in your coffee, say you're having a latte, well, how much milk are you having in that latte? Regular milk or oat milk or almond milk? And are you having almond milk because you think it's quote unquote the best for you, but it's actually disgusting and you don't like the way that it is in your latte? That's what I would answer, because I don't think it makes a good I'm a coffee snob. So I'm like, whatever, I'm gonna have a cortado. It's 4 ounces, maybe 6 ounces. I'm gonna have a little bit of oat milk in there. That's my carbohydrate. So what am I getting from a protein and a fat standpoint? So maybe that means that if I was going to get a breakfast sandwich, maybe I don't get the bun on the breakfast sandwich and I have, the rest of and so we just start to balance it out that way. And then I'm having water at that time period, we get into the hydration, but then the key thing for me is about 3 hours later, 3.5, maybe it's 4, I'm going to pit stop again. And I'm not just going to have the apple, or I'm not going to have the celery sticks, or, I'm not going to have just the snack idea, which just means small or like a partial of something. I'm going to pit stop again to resource my body. So if we think about, I think that the answer to your question is also, if we think about our bodies like a race car, then what we're doing is we're pit stopping throughout the day to give ourselves that balance. And it moves us away from, like, there is no ideal. There's like, what did you enjoy and what was better for your body today kind of thing. Yeah.
That was really good. I have to ask, since you kind of shared what an ideal breakfast for you may look like if you were
Yeah.
doing the whole oat thing and egg. So what's your lunch and dinner?
Yeah, it is so going to depend on the day, right? So like, as an example, a little bit before we jumped on, so like I woke up, okay, this is going to sound like I'm such a nutritionist. I want to be really clear, doing a lot of different things, including like testing out some stuff and like also what's at my house and what's not, but whatever. I had leftover broccoli and sardines, and I had that this morning. I actually love that. Like, that's great for me. I also really needed something fast, and I do my own espresso with some collagen, and I have a little cashew milk. So started off my day with that. I had had water before it. I'd had my supplements. The dog needed attending to, so we did the dog. I have this like nice little 10-minute fitness routine, and I knew I was coming on here. And I also from here am leaving to go do a video shoot at a coffee shop. So I'm just laying the groundwork.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
had a perfect bar. So I had a perfect bar, which is what I call better, not perfect, but it's so delicious to me and it's very filling. It's peanut butter, it's honey, it's got egg and milk protein in there. It's got this blend of organic, not vitamins, ingredients in there. Totally fine. It's going to do me until I know at about 2 o'clock, part of what I'm doing at this photo shoot is eating things. So I wanted to make sure, like, I know what, and I already have in my head, like, I know we're doing gluten-free avocado toast with salmon on top of it. And then somebody else is doing the chickpea, uh, um, quinoa salad with greens. And I think we'll do a version with chicken, a version without. So I know like that's going to be about 2 o'clock on that part. So I'm going to come home. I'm always wired and tired after I've done like a video shoot or like, TV or been on or done these
Mhm.
interviews. Going to take the dog for a walk. I will probably have, I might have a little something before that. I might not. And then I will, in my perimenopause winter self, I will be eating dinner by about 5:30. And I have no idea, but if it's following the line of what I've done of recent in my freezer, I have turkey burgers, beef burgers, salmon burgers, and I do some version of that. I have radishes that I air fried with some sweet potato, and I'm tasting a bunch of different cheeses, so I might have a little bit of these cheeses. And then I have a bunch of greens. And like, that's just like, this is me
Mhm.
home now. And I told you yesterday I had a hot dog on a non-gluten-free bun. So, it's just it like, but I will tell you, all of those things are delicious to me. And I get that if they're not delicious, afford like, and I also will say I am very budget conscious. I also am just cooking for myself. My freezer is where all of my food is. Like, so that's also, big
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that part. Yeah.
That was good. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, couple more questions here. You've shared so much with us. Okay. So because this is a longevity podcast also, so we've talked about how important, again, back to these satiety hormones, whatever we want to call them, right? How we talked about how they can impact weight, but what impact do they have on aging, like on cellular senescence, mitochondrial
Right.
function, and even cognitive decline? So what's the
Yeah.
connection there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the easy one for us to transport there. So remember, weight is a signal of the body operating either the way it's meant to or the way that it's not meant to. So with muscle and bone, we know that that's such a factor, like, and the cells and the health of cells, like, so that's
Sure.
going to be really important. And we also know that hydration and the ability for us to transport nutrients around the body is going to be key. And hydration enables what hydration truly is water bringing nutrients into the cells or water helping things like fiber work, et cetera. So the other side of it, I think is probably the easiest one to directly correlate it to aging is that the diseases associated with aging may be a toxin burden one, like we've talked about, where things are breaking down or cell, on that part. The other part, though, is the sluggishness or the failure or the interference in the transport systems. So when you look at the blood vessels or you look at blood sugar, and elevated blood sugar we know is an issue for cognitive function. We also know that when our blood flow through the blood vessels is not able to be optimal, that is an issue for stroke and for blood, the bloodstream bringing things where it needs to go, for circulation issues, for brain fog, for all sorts of things. So because they're playing a regulating role in that, I think that's really important. With GLP-1, there's also something interesting. It also functions as a neurotransmitter in our brain. So behind the blood-brain barrier, that's not, I don't want to get too off topic with your audience, but that's not what we're talking about with the version of this hormone that goes to the receptor sites and deals with, say, things like leptin and ghrelin, or that deals with insulin and other pieces. But one of the reasons it's important for us to make enough of this is that there's localized formation, there's localized making of things like our GLP-1. And we need to make sure that as a result that we're getting in enough protein and that the body can use it for this production. Yeah.
Okay. You also talk about infobesity. I've never heard that term before. So
Yeah.
there's obviously just so much conflicting nutritional information out there. how should someone in their 40s, 50s, or 60s kind of cut through the noise and figure out what actually works for their biology when it comes to metabolic health? And maybe the answer is read my book, but
Well, I mean, that's the
yeah, yeah.
yes. But also it may be work in collaboration with, like, whether it's my team, whether it's another, practitioner, or do something
Sure.
that like helps you bring this to fruition. So infobesity is this was 2011. Like, imagine how much more information we have access to. And 2011 was when I first heard it. And then I think I'm the first that has turned it into the healthcare part. But I heard it related to data and the overwhelm of data in like the tech space, right?
Sure.
On that part. And what we have with infobesity, the issue is that it's kind of like obesity, where when we have too much fat, it's a signal. Like when the body is making fat inappropriately, or keeping us from being able to lose fat, or placing fat where it's not supposed to be, like visceral fat, then that's going to be something we need to diagnose. And what happens with excess information is we don't know like good from bad. Like we have decision fatigue. We're just literally overwhelmed. So we're tucking information in all of these places, and we're just heavy from information, right? That's the obesity connotation there. And what that leads to is it leads to decision fatigue. It leads to us making, choices that are not better for our bodies. And it leads to us not actually being able to vet like which information would be better and which, isn't on that part. So one of the things that is really important to me is that we look at and we make sure that any information that we take in actually applies to us. Well, the majority of research that exists out there from a nutrition standpoint does not apply. Like, I am not in, to the best of my knowledge, I am not in any research study that exists out there, right? And so if that's the case, my practitioner and myself could be listening to research that's out there, but then we have to do the N of one on our own and say, how does that apply to me? So maybe that means I'm going to test out the magnesium that was in the research study that said this could, or maybe I'm going to take the 10 units of the semaglutide and see what it does to my body. But I'm not just going to make an assumption because of research or because of what somebody who's not even looking at the research is saying, but it's just what their lived experience has been. Their lived experience has nothing to do with yours and your body, right? On that part. So I think one of the key things that's like, whether you're 40s, 50s, 60s, is do not follow any advice for 40s, 50s, or 60s. Like, you are you at 40, right? Like, so at 40, some of my friends had 3 babies. Some of my friends were in medically induced early menopause. Some of my friends had yet to have their babies. And I was sitting there at 40, my 40s in Washington, D.C., working with, heads of states and countries and flying all around and doing all this other stuff. And my nutrition at 40 in DC was very different than my nutrition needs and what I was doing for my body in Los Angeles when I was doing more of my private practice there and living in the sun and going to the beach and riding my bicycle, right? So it's just totally different. So I think that we have to break up with diagnosing ourselves as a 40-year-old woman, as a 50-year-old, like, this is what we need. I understand why those are appealing articles or media, like, or videos, because I probably feel like I'm more like other women in their 50s than I am women in their 20s. And yet, and there's a yes to that. And yet I'm so dissimilar from other women in their 50s. And I think that's what's really important. So my advice would be to take a personalized approach. I happen to know that my book is the best playbook for that, but regardless, take a personalized approach and don't follow something based on, don't, like, it's not the amount that you need isn't based on your weight, the amount of a medication or water or protein or any nutrient. It's based on what your body needs. And we have to really figure that out. Yeah,
Sure. Got to read your book. Listeners got to
that's
read your book.
right.
Okay.
That's my longevity tip. There you go.
Almost there. That'll be my last
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
If you could give the listeners just one actionable piece of
Sure.
advice, like, I guess supporting,
Mhm.
what could they do that would really
Most
extend their,
actionable, the most actionable
yeah,
thing you can do is do assessment. So it is an action and it is important.
okay.
And even if you decide not to do the full assessment and you only assess your digestion using the questions that I have shared,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
remember, it's free on my website, do that. Because if there is something that is not working there, that's what has to be addressed on that part. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Knowing I have a
Yeah.
fractured patella, and I don't want to gain weight because now I'm like, crap, I'm not gonna be able to exercise. I just got my
Mhm.
Peloton fixed after being broken for 2 months. Now I'm thinking, gosh, I need to take a GLP-1.
Well, okay. So isn't that like,
So
I
should
just
I be
want to
eating broccoli and
share.
sardines? No, what should I be? What
Yes.
should,
So what I want to share for you is, isn't that like, I'm just going to be super honest and maybe
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
curse
yeah,
or not, but
yeah, yeah,
that's the shit of it, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
so what ends up happening is immediately you go to, I don't want to gain weight. Look, I don't want you to gain weight either, because
yeah,
that would tell me, like, the gaining of weight would tell me that your body isn't working the way that we want it to. But by the way, we know that right now because you are laid up, and here's this part. So if you reframed the messaging and you said, I want to optimally resource my body, because what really needs to happen is
yes,
I need my bone to heal,
as quick as
and I need
possible.
that my trauma, well, maybe quick,
Oh yeah,
maybe quick, but like but I need my bone to truly heal, and I need the muscles around it to heal. And
yes,
while it's
yes,
healing, I need to make sure that I don't, with the way that I'm sitting and like all these other things, I don't throw other parts of my body off. And I am going to recognize it's going to be harder for me to retain lean body mass right now. So maybe I need to be thinking about what could I do? But if I am losing some muscle, like I had surgery in July. It's December. I am still working towards getting back all my muscle.
sure,
I feel like all my muscle was back. Then I started traveling again. Anyway, I'm dancing in there. It's an ongoing process, right? So instead of thinking, like that wouldn't be the I need a GLP-1 agonist, but but if as you're going through this process, you're like, you know what, I'm having real trouble, my hormones are off, like all this other stuff, and I'm finding that I can't do X, this might be a time period where I want to use a lower dose of a GLP-1 agonist. You would have to make sure that, number one, you used it in a way where you didn't suboptimally resource, you didn't stop eating or reduce
right,
what you were
right.
eating.
I need nutrients to heal, to
And the
recover and heal.
second
Yeah,
part is you're so sedentary right now, and your body's been through the trauma, and maybe there were some antibiotics involved, your digestion. So where would I focus right now? I would focus on optimizing your digestion, and you do
sure.
that with
Yeah.
total nutrition. Yes,
Good
that's how I
advice.
would do it for you. Yes,
Great advice. Well, Ashley, this was a very different but eye-opening conversation. So
good.
I think what really stands out again is that the idea that I'll just say the popularity of these GLP-1 drugs isn't probably just about weight loss, as we assume, right? It's again, like you're saying, it's a signal that so many
Mm-hmm.
of us have underlying hormone dysfunction that's been overlooked. But the good news
Mm-hmm.
is, like through your book, we have tools through nutrition, right, that can address these challenges. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you didn't get to say yet? I want you to tell us your top longevity tip, but obviously also tell us where your book is, where listeners can find you and your program, whatnot.
Thank you. Yeah. So I always throw this back. My book should be everywhere. So if it's not somewhere, you need to let me know on that part. But you should be able to find your best shot everywhere where books are sold. My company is the Better Nutrition Program. Why is that important to you? If you're looking for a nutritionist, if you're looking for nutrition and coaching, and you're like, wait, I love what she's talking about, but how do I do this?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The book is a DIY version, but I do think that like doing that in collaboration can be better. But the book also features in it a QR code and a set of bonuses. And so for anyone who orders the book or who finds the book or gets it at the library, the QR code brings you over to those resources, which includes access to live human coaches where you can have conversation in community. So I think that like anywhere that you find that. And if you want to go to the betternutritionprogram.com, or you find us on social media there. And I think usually when you search my name, Ashley Koff RD, I'm Ashley Koff approved on Instagram. You can find me, and I do answer at this point all my own DMs and all of those things. So if you got a question or you're looking for something, or you want to gear up for like a friendly debate, I only do friendly debates. But if you're looking for that, then I would love to have those conversations with you.
Awesome. And last but not least, top longevity tip. You kind of already mentioned it, but say it again.
Yes,
Your top
that's right.
longevity.
Well, I mean, I feel like since I've said that optimizing your weight health is the foundation of longevity, I have to say that my top tip is you've got to optimize your weight health. The way to optimize your weight health is to begin with assessing it.
Assessment.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Yay, Ashley. Thank you so much for coming on the show and helping us break through the noise. I really appreciate this conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.